My daughter has a cat who has a talent for tipping over water bowls. I'm going to fix the solution, make a bowl holder for her, and it'll hold these two bowls. Stay tuned, I'll show you how it's done.
Our videos show you how to add value and character to your home.
This is the centerpiece of the room, so it really needs to visually work.
Learn how to get quality results that you'll be proud of. Welcome to Home Improvement Woodworking.
I'd like to introduce you to Kitten, or Kit for short. She's a very curious cat. She loves to use her paws and she's got tons of energy. Now if you're choosing pet bowls for your animals, what you want to do is choose the one that holds the least amount of bacteria. And given the choice between stainless steel, ceramic, or plastic, stainless steel is the best route to go. Yep, we're all out of treats. The problem with these bowls is they tend to move around. They even have rubber areas on the bottom to prevent them from moving, and a ceramic bowl like this, she can move around as well. The problem with moving water bowls is that you end up damaging the floor. This is a laminate floor, but it could also be hardwood as well. You can see Kitten here, she just loves to play with water. And unfortunately, she's moving around these bowls regardless of how heavy they are. So I need to find a solution that'll prevent these spills from happening so that the hardwood floors and laminate floors don't potentially get damaged with water sitting on them. Okay, Kit, the first thing we need to do is find a board to mount these two things in. So let me look on the scrap pile and I'll be right back. So just need to look through the scrap pile for something that's about 7.5 inches or wider. There's some ash down there. Oh, and here's a piece of pine. I'll take a look at my plywood scraps here. Here's a good sized piece. Oh, but that's cross grain, so that won't work. Here's a piece of cherry. Oh, that looks nice. So Kit, this is what I found. I found some pine, that's solid wood, and we've got some plywood here, that's cherry. The cherry is going to be stronger because we've got little gaps between the bowls here and the ends. So let's lay it out on that. Sound good? Now put Kit in the house so she's safe and I'm safe while running machines. It's not safe to be operating tools when there's pets around, especially when they've got lots of energy. So the first thing we're going to do is lay this out. What I'm doing is selecting the best part of the board and turning it upside down, and I'm going to lay out underneath. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to cut this with a jigsaw, and a jigsaw cuts on the upstroke, and that means the wood is going to splinter out, so I want that to happen on the side that's not going to be seen. I'm going to just lay these out on the corner of the board. I'll cut this out afterwards, but this extra board is going to make it easier to clamp this and cut it. What I'm going to do is set this in from the edge about 1.5 inches, and here about 3/4. So about there. Now this bowl is smaller. Just create a gap between them, get it about centered, and then trace it. Now when you're laying out marks, a pencil sometimes doesn't show up very well on dark wood, so if you're struggling with it, you can use a white pencil and that shows up a little bit better. On this cherry, it's not that bad. On walnut, you definitely want to use the white. So trace around this one, trace around this one. Now I don't want to cut right on this line because the bowl is going to fall right through. What I'm going to do is measure this. So I've got 1/4 inch, and I need to draw a line inside of that 1/4 inch. This one has a little bit less of a lip, so I need to adjust for that on this circle. So I'm just going to measure in the distance that I need here and on this side. And then what I'm going to do is take my compass and set it for the circle itself. So I'm just using this to gauge where the center is. That's almost at there. Not quite. Okay, there's center. Just move it to my new mark. And now I can draw my cut line. So when I cut with the jigsaw, I want to cut on this side of the line. I'll cut right to that edge, and that'll give me enough space that I've got an overlap here when the bowl sits in the hole. I'm going to do the same process over here. Find the center first, so it needs to be a little bit wider. Just a touch wider, and we should have center. Yep, that's it there. So I just shrink it down to my measurement here, and then I can draw the circle. I'm going to set the padding aside, and what we'll do, clamp this on the edge of the workbench, and that'll give us a good solid foundation for cutting out these holes. A job like this can be pretty dusty, so it's important that you're wearing your PPE. Wood dust is a carcinogen, so you want to make sure you're not breathing this stuff in. Let's check out the fet. Turn this over. Oh, got a bit of a problem here. How did that happen? What happens here? Well, that's a good fit. That's a good fit. Oh. Jigsaws don't cut perfectly up and down, and it looks like as I was cutting around this corner, the jigsaw blade was going on an angle around here. So I've actually got a smaller hole on this side than I do on this side. So I guess this is the right side up. The next step is to take this distance here and measure it out over here so I can cut this off, and then measure the distance over here and mark it off here so I can cut that off. Now that I have this piece cut out, you can see how narrow these areas are here, and that's what I was concerned about using solid wood that could easily snap. So with using plywood, I've got stability, but the challenge is I also have a rough edge to finish here. I've got some leftover thin pieces of cherry here from when I built this tool cabinet, and I'm going to add them to the front here, and that will dress it up. Now, Kitten's a pretty special cat to my daughter. She and her roommates have been taking care of her for a few months, and she just adopted her. So she's really excited about that. What I want to do is add a little bit of flair to this. I've got a thin piece of maple here, and I'm going to spell out the word kit as I put on this front edge here. So it'll jazz it up a little bit, add a bit of character. I use the width of the piece of maple to lay out the letters. That way I know exactly what I need to do in terms of cutting out the pieces of maple and cutting out the pieces of cherry. So this is now telling me on the right side, I need to cut out a little piece here, and then I need to put these pieces in, then cut a block here with a corner out of it, cut a block here with a triangle in it, and then fill in those little spots, and then I'm back to a straight edge here that's square to run out the rest of the edging. So I'm just coloring the letters here, so what I can do is slide along here and decide where I want to put it. I'm liking it right about there, but you can get an idea here. This is what it would look like in the center. To me, I prefer it off to the side. So I'm going to go with starting the T right there. Small parts can easily break with a miter saw, so I put a backing on this to make sure I've got a strong backing and I'll get a clean cut. It's also unsafe to cut small parts, so I'm putting a board in front, and that way I'm keeping my hands well away from the blade. First I cut a couple miters, and then what I can do is register where I want this piece to start on the corner. To cut out these little notches, I'm just going to use a block here to support the work and use the fine side of my Japanese saw, and I use this edge here to guide my line. To make these cuts with the grain, it's best to use a very sharp chisel and just take off small cuts and progressively work towards the fit you want. There we go, perfect. I use a lot of different glues in my shop, and today I'm going to be using CA glue because it dries really fast. To start the glue up, what I'm going to do is put this end piece on here so I can register where the corner is. Make sure it's exactly where I want. And I'm going to tape it on. So this is going to be my guide block. I'll just put a scrap board underneath here. Clamp that on here. Clamp that on here. And now I've got a work surface that I can work accurately up here. Got this microtip applicator I'm going to use on the smaller parts, so I'm just going to use it on this larger one as well. I'll just flip this over and we're good to go. Every glue has its advantages and disadvantages, and CA glue is great because it instantly grabs these pieces, so I can progressively put in all these small parts and get them exactly where I want. The disadvantage is I forgot to put on rubber gloves and I've glued my skin together. So you need to make sure you're wearing gloves. And to get through this, what you need to do is grab nail polish remover, soak that piece, and eventually that will come loose. So I've got to take a break here and do that, and then we'll get back to putting the rest of these letters together. Well, it took 5 minutes, but I'm back in action. So I've got this next piece here, and I'm ready to glue it on. But first, time to get on some gloves. This little piece goes in here, this goes up top here, so I need to glue this little piece in here. So this is where the micro applicator is useful. So just a little dab will do it. Stand it up in place. And that'll do it. To get the last miter perfect, what I do is line up this side first, line up this side second, get them exactly where I want, and that tells me where this long one needs to be. And then what I do is mark it straight and then on an angle here to remind me which way to cut. So I can put this back in place, put my cut piece in here, line it up with the other end, and see how my cut is. Now, it's hard to see. Let me see if I can tilt this. It's telling me this piece is a little long because there's a gap. If I close that up, put that in, I just need a little bit of a trim. When I need to trim a part just a little bit, I line up my parts, have them touch the blade, and then lift the blade, start the saw, and it allows me to cut just a little bit off the end. So with that trimmed, I can now test it once more and see if it's ready. Yep, we're good to go. So I now just have to flush cut these ends here. I need to plane down this surface so it's all the same level, and then give it a sand, and we're ready to make the legs. If you've never used a card scraper before, these are wonderful tools. They're great for making things flat. They do much better than sandpaper. The risk of using sandpaper on a veneer like this is that you could blow through it by sanding too aggressively. So I'm just going to touch this up on a very slow speed on the sander using 220 grit paper. That'll take off any of the pencil lines here and just make sure everything's nice and smooth, ready for the finish. So it's all sanded now. It not only looks nice, but it feels nice. So I'm going to block it up here, drop the bowls in. So now what I need to do is create some legs, one on each side here, and I'm just going to screw them in from the bottom of the legs. So I've got some scrap cherry here. What I'm going to do is just make 2 legs, 1.5 inches high, and install them, and then we can put the finish on. Okay, so I've cut these to length and I flared the legs a little bit. So it looks a little bit like a table. It's just a 5-degree angle there. So I'll sand these, put a screw through them into here, and then we can put a finish on. When you countersink holes like this, it's best to make sure that you drill through with a wider bit on the part that's being attached. That way your screws slide all the way in and there'll be no binding when you try and screw those together. So I'm going to put this together with some wood glue and the screws, and then I'll give it a good hold. I'm going to finish this with shellac because it doesn't have a smell to it once it's dried. If I were to use something like polyurethane, it can have a strong smell for 15 to 30 days, and that'll really put off an animal. I'm going to start by putting on some boiled linseed oil to enhance the color of the wood, and then we'll check in with Kitten and see what she's up to. Kit, what are you doing in the sink? That's where I clean my paintbrushes. The The oil's dried overnight, and this is looking pretty good. I'm happy with how it's turned out. Now, the end grain of the maple is a different color than what I've got on the face grain. So I'm going to touch up that face grain with a touch-up marker, and that'll cover the correction. And then what I'll do is mix up the shellac. Stain markers are a great way to touch up something like this. You can put the color exactly where you want it. I've created a video comparing various stain markers. I'll leave the link in the video description below. I'm going to mix up some shellac in this bottle here, and out of the can it's too thick to use. You need to dilute it with some denatured alcohol. So I'll just open this up here, and the way I measure it out is 1 part alcohol, 2 parts shellac, and I just use a syringe. Now you can measure it by the syringe, or you can measure it by in the container. It's easier for me to do it in the container because I can just pour the denatured alcohol into it. So it's got some grades here, 10 mils, 20 mils, 30 mils. So I'm just going to fill up this container to the 20 mil line. Like that. And then I can top it up with the alcohol. So you can see at the top the alcohol sitting on top. I just need to shake this and then we're good to go. Now this shellac rag I've used a couple times already, but as long as you keep it in an airtight container, you can probably get away with using it for about a month. So there's the consistency of it. Just pour a little on the rag. The nice thing about this finish is it dries extremely fast. So you need to just consistently wipe, keep a wet edge as you go through and finish. And it only takes about 5 or 10 minutes for the coat to dry, and then you can do another one. So in an hour you can put on about 5 coats. To seal out the plywood edge here, it's really thirsty, so what I'm doing is just taking the fluid directly from the bottle and putting it on that inside edge, and you'll see it just soaks in. That's a fast way to seal it up, so it's getting lots of fluid, and then will allow me to build future coats on top of that. After the first coat's dried, I just take a superfine Scotch-Brite pad, or you can use 000 superfine steel wool. And what you want to do is just knock down any high points on the finish before putting on the next one. It's a fairly quick process. Just make sure you rub with the grain, and you're good to go. The last step of prep is just using a tack rag, which is a sticky rag, to take off any of the dust that's on here, and that'll make sure you get a smooth coat on the next one. So I'm going to put on 4 more coats, and it takes about 10 minutes to dry in between, and we'll check in on some kitten videos in between the coats. finish on this is now dry, and I hope you enjoyed some of those clips about kitten. The last step I've got here is to put this anti-skid padding on, and what that does is prevents this from moving around when kitten's at the dish. Now we provide these videos for free, so if you'd like to support us, please give this a thumbs up or subscribe. You can forward this video to some of your friends to watch, and you can also purchase some items that we've got in the video description. It helps earn some money so we can make more videos, and we've actually got a 10% discount on Starbond products, so it'll save you some money as well. I've got one more kitten video at the very end of this video past our title screen, so stick around to the end. But let me get these pads on, and we'll take this in the house and see what kitten thinks. These are self-adhesive pads. I just take some out here, and I'll just stick them on. They're a little bit like the material you'd find on a mouse pad. So I'll just line them up here. Now they're shorter strips than what I need, so I just have to cut a piece on the end here to add on that side, but they're really easy to put on.